editor's note, the script was finished months before Postman came out, and I don't particularly have anything to say about it, so this video will just be treating it like it doesn't exist. I don't want to think about Postman. Salad Fingers, if nothing else, is a series. That's one of the only clear things about it. People have theorized for over a decade since the series' original episode about its deeper meaning, the lore and mystery behind the seemingly post-apocalyptic environment our titular character exists in, and the metaphors created by the different nonsensical aspects that frequently crop up in the cartoon. I'm here to tell you that none of that matters at all because I'm autistic and so is Salad Fingers. Okay, I can already hear the booing because the internet is infamous for fucking hating autistic people, but for once, give me a chance. Let me explain why this creepy little lettuce-fingered man is the most autistic fucking thing I've ever seen since Allison from The Breakfast Club. And as a forward, I feel like I get sidetracked a lot in this video. That's the nature of comorbid autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. You're never gonna stay on one track. But I do hope whatever points I make, however non-related they might be, are at least slightly interesting to whoever watches this. But as much as I go on about the nature of Salad Fingers as a character representing my disorder, I want to stress that really that isn't what this video is about. Really, this video doesn't even have to be about Salad Fingers at all. The point I want to make is that autism is a filter that affects everything in your life. How you view yourself and your identity, how you understand others, and how society treats you. This video at its heart is about estrangement and ultimately finding familiarity, and I happen to do so in Salad Fingers. It's about representation, yes, but I don't think I can make any great resounding points that haven't already been made. Life is hard, and life is lonely, and I can make it a little bit better by projecting my experiences onto a little green creature with long fingers. First, some background. I assume if you're watching this, you're already aware of the literally infamous 14-year-old horror series I'm babbling nonsensically about, but it never hurts to provide context. Salad Fingers is a currently 11-episode long animated horror series, not counting the most recent upload Market, as that's basically a glorified ad, created by animator David Firth. The first episode, Spoons, released in May of 2007, and even if you haven't seen the series in its entirety, there's a high chance you will have seen Spoons at some point, as it became a viral hit for its disturbing and unsettling nature, being promoted by such people as the Fine Bros in their reaction series, and yes, who fucking remembers the Fine Bros? Everyone and their mother has seen
I like rusty spoons. I like to touch them. The feeling of rust against my salad fingers is almost orgasmic.
Salad Fingers itself doesn't have that much of a story, or at least not a clear one, until the final episode. It very much just started as a typical creepy David Firth short, similar to Spoilsbury Toast Boy or Health Reminders, but the boom in popularity drove more episodes out and in turn expanded the world of Salad Fingers, quickly cementing the series as the icon that David Firth is most known for. The show is led, of course, by Salad Fingers, a green man with long, lettucey fingers who likes rust, playing with puppets, and accidentally cooking children alive. He lives in some kind of dismal wasteland, commonly theorized to be post-nuclear war, due to the seemingly mutant look of most of the characters and the consistent references to World War I. The episodes usually don't have much linking them. Salad Fingers has a short and usually grotesque adventure, and the episode ends. Aside from the obvious gore and creep factor, the most consistent themes throughout the series are actually childcare and abuse. The references to childbirth are frequent, starting with a pram in nettles and leading all the way to Salad Fingers literally giving birth from his stomach to some kind of grub in letter. That isn't really relevant to this video, I just thought it was something kind of insane that no one ever mentions. I, like a lot of other people, was a part of the crowd who saw Spoons at a very young age, got freaked the hell out, and got too scared to watch the rest of the series. And for years after, I still didn't. I remember watching theory videos from creators such as MatPat and Nothing Explained. Side note, I don't remember the latter, but let me just say MatPat's theory fucking sucks, by the way. I fucking hate that guy, every offense. But anyway, I never finished watching the series myself because it simply creeped me out too much, or I thought it did. More recently, like maybe a few years back, I decided to finally sit down and watch the entire thing fully. I think this was before Glass Brother was out, and I was met with the most autistic little bitch I've ever seen. I have autism. I'm sure that's clear by now. I only realized this in the past few years, but as anyone with a disorder like this knows, that doesn't mean I didn't experience it my entire life. As a child, I was isolated and ostracized by my classmates for being strange and different. I had weird habits, and I never grew out of playing like the other kids seemed to. I felt constantly separated from my environment, like I couldn't understand other people or form unconditional connections. I was autistic, and I had no idea. And looking at Salad Fingers, I found something to relate to. That was me. Which sounds insane when you watch the series, right? Like, touche, he's a cannibalistic little freak who plays with corpses, and he's meant to be creepy. I get it, that's the whole point. Like, he was never meant to be written with my disorder in mind, so I don't feel offended, like he or David Firth are making fun of me. But there was something specific about seeing this man who had been touted for over a decade as a pinnacle of horror animation, who was constantly called creepy and weird and cringed at, and who I myself thought was terrifying when I was younger. And then realizing that he acted like me. It showed a sudden transparency to how allistics see me. In writing this script, I went back and rewatched the series again, and I made a note of all the traits that jumped out to me. This was at first improving my point of how his mannerisms mirror mine, but again, I was faced with the fact that his traits are supposed to be uncanny. It's difficult. Realizing that everyone is in on a joke that you are the butt of, that everyone thinks he's a creep, and any actual sympathy they have for him is intertwined with this, like, circus freak detached intrigue of, well, he's actually quite sweet in spite of these creepy behaviors. But I still want to share them anyway, because I went through the effort. So strap in, allistics, because you're about to learn some terminology. We're doing a rapid fire autism round. Number 1, sensory stimming. Physically, I literally can't explain what stimming is, so I'm just gonna read out this thing from the autism.org.uk website. Stimming or self-stimulating behavior includes arm or hand flapping, finger flicking, rocking, jumping, spinning or twirling, head banging, and complex body movements. It includes the repetitive use of an object, such as flicking a rubber band or twirling a piece of string, or repetitive activities involving the senses, such as repeatedly feeling a particular texture. This is usually done to self-soothe, self-regulate, for enjoyment, or to express your emotions, and it's just a natural part of being autistic. You can't really control it, and it is physically uncomfortable to try and hold it back. In this case, what I'm talking about is, of course, Salad Fingers' infamous rusty spoons obsession. It's literally him finding sensory stimulation in the texture of rust. Number 2, dialogue. Salad Fingers speaks in a very soft but deliberate voice, sounding like he chooses words very carefully with a very stilted tone.
Hello, operator. Could you connect me up to my old pal Charlie, please? Post haste.
He is also a perfect example of pedantic speech, which is a common feature of autism, where one speaks overly formally and uses heavily complex words in inappropriate situations. Number 3, body language. He is so awkward, Jesus Christ. He bends over forwards, twists his head constantly, seems unsure of his positioning, and is overly rigid. He's also near constantly fidgeting with his fingers. Number 4, socializing. He sucks at it. Salad Fingers enjoys sitting alone, playing with his puppets, and creating elaborate scenarios where he can script all of his conversations and not risk anything. His interactions with other characters are interesting to me, and This is completely metaphor here, okay? With the exception of Mabel from Picnic, all of the characters he interacts with speak in ways that we as viewers can't understand, like sound effects and grunting. This to me rings very true to how difficult it is to understand Allistics, and how all their social cues seem to be an entire other language to Salad Fingers. That's literally just my interpretation though. Number 5. Gender roles. A very interesting fact is that according to a study done by a neuropsychologist called John Strang in 2014, autistic people are 7.59 times more likely to, quote, express gender variance. To any LGBT autistics, I'm sure this isn't news, it's natural correlation. Autism means a difficulty understanding social roles, which gender is hugely built up of. It makes sense that we don't understand the point of sticking to a certain gender or expression because that's how X acts. Similarly, Salad Fingers is generally a very effeminate character, soft-spoken and polite, and frequently puts on a more strict and motherly sounding tone.
Heavens to Betsy, what now?
As well as fantasizing at one point about going to a salon and wearing dresses several times. There are other things too, just in general, like his generally creepy demeanor with heavy breathing, eating inedible stuff like dirt, and his safety cupboard, which is a small dark space he goes to calm down. I saw myself and my autism in the most uncanny of characters, and that makes sense. Allistics love to demonize what they don't understand, as most oppressor groups do. And again, this isn't a slight on David Firth. I love the universe he created. It just makes it all too clear when I see Salad Fingers as a friendly, misunderstood autist, and others see him as a freak. Horror is made out of what is perceived to be unfamiliar. But ultimately, I guess this is once again a representation issue. Autistics are of course not the only victims of this. Every minority faces struggles with seeing themselves represented on screen. But I'm autistic, so today I will talk about autism. And I want to make it clear again that this is just one point in the long, roundabout way I'm discussing this topic. Autistic representation is particularly difficult, and I want to dissect why, and why it's not necessarily a good thing when characters are confirmed, and why there is power in interpretation. So, what is with autistic representation? It sucks, basically. I mean, that's the problem. Autistic representation is little and far between, and for every passably good autist you get, there will no doubt be another good doctor. But what's wrong with the good doctor? Everything. Everything. No one needs another savant. We've had Sherlock, Atypical, Sheldon, Rain Man. Please God, let the mediocre men end. To go momentarily deeper into it though, the issue is not every fucking autistic person is A, white, B, a cisgender man, C, heterosexual, or D, a savant. The whole foundation of autism is that it is a spectrum disorder. It manifests in 1,000 different ways and anyone can have it. There is no autistic look, and yet when Allistics think of autistics, they think of your typical Sheldon. A white, cis, heterosexual man who doesn't understand shit from fucking conversations, cares about no one, and is supernatural levels of genius. And it certainly doesn't help that these characters are all played by Allistic actors. Watching them on screen feels like a mockery, a caricature of our experience that has been hyper-observed by an egotistical man so we can rake in points for the impressive nature of mimicking our disgusting attributes so effortlessly, and then while simultaneously taking away roles from actual autistics in the industry. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. These stereotypical traits exist in autistic people. They just shouldn't be the accepted autistic look. There will be 1,000 men like this out there living their autistic lives, and that's okay. And these are autistic traits and are not inherently bad things. They need to be respected and accommodated for. But the image of autistics has always been the savant, and this harms the community. It's common knowledge to autistic people that if you are assigned female at birth, or a person of color, or transgender, or poor, or any other thing that doesn't fit the stereotype of an emotionless, train-loving male, there is a very low chance you will be diagnosed, or if you are, it would be a very long and traumatizing experience. The conversation on self-diagnosis online seems incredibly shallow to me. The culture of bullying children, especially teenage girls, on all platforms has led to a kind of rhetoric that I see circled constantly. Self-diagnosis? Bad. You're just looking for attention. Only teenage girls with daddy issues fake depression, etc. But people don't understand, like I mentioned, how excruciatingly fucking difficult getting a diagnosis can be. I will be completely transparent here, which is a dangerous thing to be on the internet, and say that I am not diagnosed. I am a white, assigned female at birth, transgender 17-year-old, and I have autism, but no diagnosis. For several months now, I have been trying to begin the process, but like I said, it's borderline impossible. I live in the UK, where we have national healthcare. Big win! But the NHS is severely underfunded, especially in the mental health sector, so that means waiting lists are literally years long just to get evaluated. And that's only if you manage to get on the list. Knowing this, when I first tried looking into things with my therapist, we wanted to go the private route. This is any healthcare that is not covered by the NHS, basically independent. Typically, private healthcare is a lot more thorough and considerate because the waiting lists are much shorter and the demand much less, so they have more time to see more people and work much more personally. However, because it's not under the NHS, the patient has to pay for everything themselves. And hey, did you know that an autism evaluation costs on average upwards of £1,500? That's just over $2,000. And my family does not have the money to just give that up front so a doctor can see me and go, oh yeah, the bitch is crazy. So that was fairly crushing. So with private off the table, we went to the trusty old NHS. I had to wait a month for an appointment because COVID, and then I went in fully prepared with a thorough list of symptoms, my supportive mother, and a pre-mailed letter from my therapist supporting my referral. Do you understand how lucky and privileged I was to have even that? And that's not even accounting for the fact that I am white, and therefore instantly more likely to be taken seriously based on looks alone. Because of those things, I was listened to. I know if I were on my own in this, with no backup or support, I would have been rejected because I tried the same thing 3 years ago and I was told I was probably just experiencing adverse feelings from bullying I was facing and was looking up symptoms online to find answers I didn't have. But because I had support that so many autistic people don't have, I was listened to, and we began filling out the referral sheet for me to get put on the official evaluation waitlist. Until I got a call from another doctor an hour later saying that they couldn't do referrals for minors, that I would get rejected anyway, and that I needed to get a referral through my college, which is all well and good, except I already went to my college, who were the very people who said that they couldn't do a referral and I needed one through the NHS. That was a tangent, I know, but ultimately the point is the process of even getting seen, much less being listened to and acknowledged during an evaluation, is fucking difficult. You go back and forth, dissuaded at every step, getting contradictory information and stupid waiting times and patronizing medical workers, and in the center of it all, there's you, who just wants a little kindness. It's difficult to be autistic. And that's not because I have autism. I wouldn't change that. It's because you will never belong. People think they know better than you, or they think you're strange, and all you want is to be listened to and to be understood. This all then comes back to self-diagnosis. A common misunderstanding of what self-diagnosis is that it's simply someone, usually young and inexperienced, glancing at a symptom list, going, lol me, and then plastering the label on themselves for attention. And while this does happen, it's nowhere near the majority. Additionally, as a side note, you also always have to wonder what kind of mental state these people are in anyway to do that. The majority of times I've seen, it's rarely ever been malicious, and rather an attempt at understanding some part of themselves that they aren't comfortable with, or reaching out for attention or understanding from peers or adults. And that in itself is a very mentally ill thing to do. They definitely shouldn't just be throwing these labels around, but they don't deserve to be ridiculed for it. But, back on topic, self-diagnosis is a very grueling, informed, and intense process. It is constant second-guessing, self-evaluation, research, and discussion. It is not glancing at the criteria and clinging to a label. When people can say with their whole heart after several years of research and heartfelt self-analysis that they have a mental disorder, most likely they have that mental disorder. And especially in autism's case, when diagnosis is so difficult and the stereotypes so rigid, self-diagnosis is welcomed and encouraged in the community. If you say you have autism, you have autism. No questions asked. After all, the only place that an autistic can ever feel at home is with people like us, so the doors are wide open for newcomers. But again, I'm tangenting. What does this have to do with representation? Well, when good representation is so bottom of the barrel, you naturally scrounge and then naturally start making your own. Who else could make autistic characters better than autistic creators? I happen to have a very autistic friend group, and for this video essay I posed them 3 questions. A. What is canon autistic representation you can think of? So, actual confirmed representation. B. What is coded representation you can think of? And C. Who do you think personally is autistic? Between us, which was around 5 people, we ended up making a huge fucking list, safe to say, but here we go. So, the canon representation. I specifically didn't call this good representation because some of it isn't.
Where do you fall on the spectrum? My horse is hitched to a post that is closer to Asperger's and autistics than narcissists and sociopaths.
But even those are characters that my friends liked and could relate to, even if they weren't the best written. When you're autistic, you learn to accept what you're given. The representation is so awful most of the time that any slightly positive scraps that are thrown can be clung to, and that's okay. It doesn't make anyone a bad person or a bad autistic ever to relate to stereotypes or quote-unquote bad representation if it feels true to your experience. And I'll say before I read any of these names out, half of these I have no idea who they are, my friends just suggested them, so I'm sorry if I pronounce any names wrong. We have Amber from Atypical, Dr. Latham from Chicago Med, Abed from Community, Matilda Andrea from Everything's Gonna Be Okay, Will Graham from Hannibal, Maurice from the IT Crowd, Symmetra from Overwatch, Futaba from Persona 5, Billy Cranston from Power Rangers, Entrapta from She-Ra, Dwight Tharp from The Strange Case of Origami Yoda, River and Isabel from To the Moon, Gus from Tracy Beaker, and Gin Ibushi from Your Turn to Die. So, in a group of 5 people, that was the most we could come up with, and it wasn't a lot. That still doesn't even account for whether or not the representation itself is well written. Coding is more tricky. Coding in media is where your character is not explicitly something, but their storyline or character still reads clearly as that thing. Whether this is because of a higher power such as a network that won't allow it to be confirmed, or for an in-story reason such as the thing not actually being possible, for example a non-human character being coded as a person of color. Usually this is intentional, but for this list we decided to go with any character we thought could be very clearly read as autistic regardless of intention. And I will go more into detail with a few of them because I want people to understand what makes us view these characters as autistic and understand what makes a good autism story. So for this one, we have Neddy from Adventure Time, Anne from Anne with an E, Tina from Bob's Burgers, Edward Scissorhands from Edward Scissorhands, Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle, Mob from Mob Psycho 100, Suzanne from Orange is the New Black, Lily from Sex Education, Spock and Data from Star Trek, Bubba from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Allison from The Breakfast Club, and Momoko from Watamote. These characters have storylines or personalities that scream autism but are not canonized. This might mean that they experience feelings of being inherently different or ostracized from society in their storyline, or they might display a number of everyday autistic traits but never be confirmed or labeled. Alternatively, the character might be based clearly and purposefully on an autistic attitude, such as Bubba from Texas Chainsaw, whose mannerisms were purposefully modeled after neurodevelopmentally disabled children. Neddy is a bubblegum dragon from Adventure Time, and Princess Bubblegum's brother. His entire episode is about how he has always been highly sensitive and fearful, unlike his sister, struggling in his change in environment since he was born. By the end of the episode, he happily returns to his home under the castle where he can suckle on the roots of the candy tree in safety, and Bubblegum remarks very pointedly,
"People get built different. We don't need to figure it out, we just need to respect it."
That's a sentiment I wish more people followed, and I think Adventure Time is wonderful for making an effort to teach that lesson. As autistics, we are expected to change to fit into regular society, but we shouldn't have to. Society needs to accommodate and accept us. Now, when I watched The Breakfast Club, I immediately googled if Allison was autistic, because that girl could not have been anything else. She was a reject and an outcast, socially inept and laughed at the wrong time, chewed her nails, had weird eating habits and didn't talk, and when she did, she said weird shit. She was autistic as autistic comes, and a welcome example of a realistically written female autistic character, but she's never been confirmed anywhere, so once again, I believe this is an example of writers basing a character on conventions of autism to make them weird or an outcast trope, which is okay because often autistic people will be these people in real life, but still, I wish they would say out loud and proud that she has autism, but what can you expect from a movie from the 80s? Lilo and Stitch is a comfort movie of mine, I have to admit. Who doesn't love found family with aliens? And I know some people will vehemently disagree with this analysis of Lilo's character, and will cite the fact that she is a 6-year-old child with a very huge and recent trauma. But don't come for me over this. I know. Two things can coexist at once. That Lilo is a young traumatized kid, and that she has autism that exacerbates this. Lilo lost her parents in a car accident, and is taken care of by her older sister Nani, and her life is full of alienation and behavioral issues. She goes through the familiar autistic experience of not knowing that your friends actually hate you. She is genuinely excited around her hula class and wants to hang out and play with them when she sees them, but she's called a freak and crazy and a loser. And despite this, she still believes that they're friends. Lilo displays many autistic behaviors. The movie literally opens with an amazing example, Pudge the fish. Lilo is late to hula class because every Thursday she feeds Pudge the fish a peanut butter sandwich, but they didn't have any peanut butter, so she had to go buy some. She explains fully seriously that she does this because Pudge controls the weather. If one were to read between the lines, they might connect that her parents died on a rainy day and she thinks it's her fault for not feeding Pudge, showing how trauma and autistic routines interact. She becomes overzealously upset while explaining this, and while it makes perfect sense to her, her class doesn't understand and calls her names and treats her strangely. I often become upset and frustrated when trying to explain routines, something that feels perfectly normal to me but seems ludicrous to someone else. People treat me like I'm insane over it, when it's just how I function. Lilo in general is a very monotonous girl, seeming far too mature in a lot of situations, and struggles with communicating with Nani, resorting to screaming and mumbling. The only time she ever begins to feel fully settled is with Stitch, who in his own right can be seen as an autism allegory, or at least some other form of mental illness or trauma, but he is literally an alien bioengineered for mass destruction, so I am way less inclined to put him on the list. But either way, the story is beautiful, of someone who has been outcasted and treated as a freak her whole life,
I remember everyone leaves.
finally finding someone who understands her because he has been treated the same way. I love them. I love this movie. I feel like I've already been talking too long, so I'll make this one quick, but Edward Scissorhands fits the mark as well. Outcasted from society, acts seemingly eerie and aloof but is actually very sweet and polite, just misunderstood, doesn't understand social conventions to the point that he's constantly taken advantage of in the movie, and when his circus freak intrigue has been worn out by the holistic town, he is immediately demonized and has to flee despite being completely innocent. The last coding I'll talk about is Mob Psycho 100. Mob is an example of a character that we know isn't meant to be autistic. He already has an in-universe explanation for his life and behavior, but he is literally a perfect allegory for autism. Mob Psycho 100 is a manga turned anime series about a high schooler called Shigeo Kageyama, or Mob, shocking, I know, who lives in a world where psychics exist and he happens to be one, and a very, very powerful one. Every time Mob uses his powers, he feels like he hurts others, so he keeps a very tight hold on his emotions and lives his life constantly masking and reining himself in so he doesn't risk hurting anyone. This is a familiar autistic feeling, the common experience of having to hide your autistic traits, your true self, because other people will find it difficult or troubling, and you have to fit in just to be accepted by others. And then, when everything becomes too much, when you're so tired from changing yourself, from acting the role, you just break down. You have an overload or a meltdown and everyone sees your true self and it feels like the world is breaking. Mob in general acts in a very autistic manner, being a very monotonous character who speaks his mind and doesn't understand why certain things may be inappropriate to say. He is kind-hearted and trusting and easily exploited, which is another known experience. Not understanding when people don't have your best intentions and being manipulated or hurt by them because of it. When I look at a lot of these characters, they feel much more authentic to what being autistic actually is, and a lot of the time I feel it's because the holistic creators aren't trying to make them autistic. They aren't biased by the stereotyped idea of autism they have in their heads because the characters aren't meant to be autistic. They are allowed to do things that a savant can't, like express themselves in a real way, not an holistic way, mind you, because we have our own way of communicating, or even experience connections as deep as romance and love. These characters just happen to have a personal story, a relatable one rather than a quote-unquote autistic one, so they hit a lot closer to the truth. Still, one wishes that these stories could exist under the loud and proud autistic label, and that we didn't have to resort to this tiptoeing in order to get decent depictions. Now, we get to the most extensive section, headcanons. These are the characters that aren't canon or even coded in any purposeful way, but me and my friends still think they're autistic just because. I went into this experiment wondering if there were any similarities between the types of characters we relate to. With Salad Fingers, I saw a specific instance of me seeing myself in the uncanny outcast, alienated from others, so I wanted to see if there was a similar pattern with other headcanons from my friends, who all walk very different threads of life. And the answer I found was fucking no, of course not. We will take all your faves and we will rub our grubby little autist hands all over them. I jest, but this has a very real explanation. Like I said, autism is a vast spectrum and can present 1,000 different ways, and any person can be autistic, so why can't any character? I'll try to go quick, I promise, but here is our admittedly fucking lengthy list of community-approved autistics. Salad Fingers from Salad Fingers, obviously, Bonnabelle Bubblegum and Fern from Adventure Time, Carrie from Carrie, Elle from Death Note, Chris from Deltarune, Ray from Eva, Dipper and Mabel from Gravity Falls, Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, Dib from Invader Zim, the entire Losers Club from It, Komi from Komi Can't Communicate, Alex from Life is Strange, Malcolm and Reese from Malcolm in the Middle, the main six from My Little Pony, yes, every single one, Nuggy from Neo The World Ends With You, Gregory from Over the Garden Wall, Beth Harmon from Queen's Gambit, Herbert West from Reanimator, Kieran Duffy from Red Dead Redemption 2, Boris Habit from Smile For Me, Eleven and Will Byers from Stranger Things, and Brick from The Middle. And there's still countless others that we think are autistic, but didn't include here. In reality, at least in our experience, when you're autistic, you naturally make your favorite characters autistic too. It's the best way to understand them, to make them familiar, like you. Even if they don't have traits or an autistic story necessarily, you make them understandable. Looking at this list, there are certainly similarities. Being awkward in social situations, struggling with relating to others, being considered eccentric, whether that be positive or negative. But but truly I don't see one solid, firm pattern that makes a character autistically inclined, and that makes perfect sense. My friends are all vastly different people. Our autism presents itself in different ways. I am over-empathetic. My friend may lack empathy entirely. I mask easily in social situations. My friend cannot. We all exist on different axes of the spectrum, and additionally all live different lives, have different backgrounds and cultures and upbringings. I feel like I keep repeating myself, but truly there is no autistic experience. We are not a monolith. We share experiences and we share struggles and similarities and vast differences, but there is no one thing that makes us all autistic, aside from that very thing, the experience of having autism. I feel like I went into this lightly with the coding section, how a lot of better autistic rep is achieved when the aim isn't to tell an autistic story, because then the holistic author isn't, as Lane said, clouded by their own judgment. But equally, we see characters as autistic because autism literally changes the way you view the world, so you can perceive the most personal traits in the most holistic seeming characters to others. So, given everything I just said about representation, I guess my final point is Salad Fingers is autistic. And despite everything I just said about accurate representation, I don't need him to be that. He's not autistic because he was written that way, or fits some holistic preconceived notion of autism. He's not even autistic because I find him relatable. He's autistic because I'm autistic. This isn't some fact, your fave is autistic and that's just because I said so. It's because we find comfort in understanding. Salad Fingers is autistic because I can't understand holistics. I can't decipher your social conventions, your norms and unspoken rules, and I will never be part of your society. But I know Salad Fingers, and I understand him in a way that I don't think holistics will ever be able to. This isn't me saying I am smart and you are not, it's me saying my brain is literally wired different, so my view of this guy is vastly different to how you see him. So he is autistic. I didn't go into this intending to make some great statement about the autistic experience. I like Salad Fingers, and I wanted to show people how he's like me. But in researching and in talking with my friends, in thinking about what I really did want to say with this video, I kind of came to a different conclusion than I expected. Even if Salad Fingers didn't act the way he does, he'd still be autistic to me. I truly think that when you have autism, any character you care about, coded or not, will seem autistic to you. It's the only way you learn to consume them in a way that makes sense. So I guess, what is even the point of me saying all this? I don't think I've been saying anything particularly groundbreaking, but I don't want this to have just been me info-dumping for however long. I think the end point for me is that representation is important, and generally, of course, good representation is a good thing. Of course it is. But I don't think it matters nearly as much to us as other forms of representation would to other groups, because autism as a community is very much based on self-determination and acceptance. So there is some kind of power for us to decide ourselves who we think has our disorder in the media we consume. We do this out of habit, as an instinct to understand and familiarize. And someone that my friend might think is autistic might not make any sense to me because our disorders present entirely differently, but I accept that because I know it's a spectrum. There is no monolith autistic experience, so therefore every character we love, regardless of attitude or story, could be the autistic representation we take to heart. And all of this rambling literally came about just because I wanted to talk about Salad Fingers. Okay, so that was a lot. I hope literally any of what I've just said made sense or was at least interesting to anyone watching this. This is the first time I've done something like this, and I'm sure you can tell I'm not the best at formulating my thoughts or keeping consistent, so I want to deeply thank my friends for helping me write this essay, from helping me with our list of autistic characters to proofreading the various drafts and helping me distinguish what the hell I'm actually trying to say at every turn. Additionally, I thank you all for your autism. You guys are one of the only places I ever feel taken care of. I could not have done this without any of you. I also want to thank my counselor Lucy, who has always been there for me and encourages my passions wholeheartedly every session. Showing this to you one day was one of my main motivators to continue making it. And of course, thank you to anyone outside of my group of friends who actually watches this. I doubt there will be many, but thank you deeply if you enjoyed.